Our top story is focused on a controversial procurement contract. It's between the RCMP and Sinclair Technologies, a communications company that is partly owned by China. That combination triggered fears about a possible risk of espionage targeting Canada's National Police Service. The contract has now been suspended. Let's bring in the CBC's Karina Roman with more on this. Karina, what's the latest now?
Well, in light of the suspension of the contract, obviously lots of questions on Parliament Hill about what this means. Just to back up and remind people about this contract, Hytera Communications, which is China-owned and controlled, took over Norsat in 2017, which was the parent company of Sinclair Technologies. And then in 2021, Sinclair Technologies won a $500,000 contract to provide and maintain the radio frequency software for the communication software for the RCMP, which is a kind of system that prevents eavesdropping. So it's about secure communications, obviously. Now, this didn't seem to be noticed until a year and a bit later by our Radio Canada colleagues. Marc Godbout, the reporter, figured out that this was happening, and suddenly, of course, everyone's up in arms about what this could mean for the security of the RCMP communications. So that's the background on the story. Now that the contract has been suspended, questions on Parliament Hill whether that is enough. Does that end the story? And that question was put to Michael Barrett of the Conservatives on his way into question period. Here's what he had to say.
That the government put the fox in charge of the hen house, and we need to find out how this happened and make sure it doesn't happen again. Simply saying that once they get caught, that the government's prepared to make the change. We Canadians need to have confidence that the government is making the right decision the first time, and not only after opposition or media check their homework.
Now, part of the problem was that the criteria for the contract that the Public Service and Procurement Department had to review did not include national security review or concerns. It didn't include, any kind of review of the ownership of the company. And those criteria would have been placed on the contract or the request for proposals for the contract by Public Safety, which is now reviewing the process of these contracts and, how it all happened in the first place.
Karina, what's the government saying?
Well, first of all, they're saying that, this contract was signed by the independent public service, so not taking direct responsibility for it, saying that, of course, it has to look into. They understand their concerns. Now, the Prime Minister, on his way into question period, was asked about what sort of is the root of all this, which is that 2017 takeover of Norsat by Hytera, which meant that Sinclair Technologies also got taken over, and why that was allowed in the first place. And what's interesting is, I could pull up this story here. It was actually a Canadian press story, but we published it as well in 2017. It says, "No security risks in Chinese takeover of Canadian satellite firm," says the Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau. So, of course, he was asked about whether that takeover should have been allowed in the first place. And here was his rather brief response.
Mr. Trudeau, Prime Minister, why did you approve the takeover of Norsat by Hytera in 2017 without any full-fledged national security review? Do you have concerns with this contract now?
Well, as you well know, we've just put forward improvements and a new proposal around strengthening ICA for exactly these sorts of reasons.
But there are dozens of contracts that have been issued.
Now, ICA refers to the Investment Canada Act, and these amendments were tabled yesterday by François-Philippe Champagne, the Minister for Innovation. The amendments, the government hopes that the amendments they're making would make it easier to red flag deals that might have national security concerns, or even make it easier to call a national security review before a takeover even happens. That's true. But there's really nothing in the current act that would have prevented Trudeau and the cabinet in 2017 to ask for a national security review, which didn't happen at that time. So it's important to point that out. Now, Minister Mélanie Joly, the Foreign Affairs Minister, she was also asked about this on her way into question period, and she pointed to the new Indo-Pacific strategy that the government has just revealed last month, and that part of that is putting sort of a national lens, a national security lens on all activities when dealing with that region of the world. And you get a sense that regardless of why things were allowed in the past, especially, the takeover by a company which now also faces charges in the U.S. of espionage, that there's just such a heightened awareness and a less naivety about the security of some of the countries that we've done business with or that have had investments in Canadian companies.
Okay, Karina, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Karina Roman in Ottawa.